Warning: the following story contains fantasy violence and mature romantic themes. The first breath of cold air that met Fiona Marlowe's face when she stepped out of her van should have sent her straight back inside, but the commission was worth 6 months of rent, and her landlord didn't accept excuses as payment. She wrapped her scarf tighter and began unloading her equipment, the cases of glass rods clinking softly as snowflakes settled on the metal. The estate loomed above her, perched on the mountainside like something that had grown from the rock itself, all dark stone and narrow windows that caught the failing light. Gothic revival, she thought, probably 19th century, definitely the kind of place that had its own wing for ghosts. Her client had been specific about the timeline, insisting she arrive before the storm, insisting the chandeliers be installed within the week, insisting on meeting her in person despite her portfolio being more than adequate for the job. The front door opened before she could knock. The man standing in the threshold was the most striking person Fiona had ever seen, and she'd grown up in art school where everyone tried very hard to be interesting. His hair was pure white, falling past his shoulders in a way that should have looked ridiculous, but somehow didn't. His skin matched it, pale as fresh snow, and his eyes were the gray of winter clouds. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, midnight blue with silver threading, and when he smiled at her, the expression was so genuinely pleased that she forgot to be cold for a moment. "Miss Marlowe," he said, his voice carrying a faint accent she couldn't place. "European, certainly. Old European. You made excellent time despite the weather. I'm Balthazar Drakenmoor." "Mr. Drakenmoor." She shook his hand, startled by how cold his fingers were, even through her glove. "Thank you for the opportunity. I have to admit, when you said estate, I was picturing something a little less, Transylvanian." He laughed, a rich sound that echoed in the stone entry hall behind him, and she noticed with odd clarity that no fog came from his mouth despite the freezing air. Her own breath was making white clouds with every word. "I can't deny my aesthetic preferences," he said, stepping aside to let her in, "though I promise the heating works beautifully. You'll be comfortable while you work." The interior was exactly as dramatic as the exterior suggested, but warmer than she'd expected. Tapestries lined the walls, thick carpets covered the floors, and the furniture looked antique but well-maintained. Balthazar led her through a series of rooms, pointing out where each chandelier would hang, discussing light levels and crystal arrangements with the kind of detailed knowledge that suggested he'd been thinking about this for a very long time. "I've been meaning to update the lighting for years," he admitted, as they stood in the grand ballroom, its ceiling soaring 3 stories above them. "But I wanted someone who understood that light is meant to be alive, not merely functional. Your work has that quality. The pieces seem to breathe." Fiona felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "That's the goal. Glass should move even when it's still, catch the light differently every time you look at it." "Precisely." His smile was devastating. "I knew when I saw your gallery show that you understood. There was this one piece, the installation with the layered panels. It looked like water frozen mid-wave." "You went to my show?" She was genuinely surprised. It had been a small gallery in the city, poorly advertised, mostly attended by people she'd personally begged to come. 3 times, Balthazar said easily. "I kept seeing new things in it. That's rare." They talked for another hour, discussing designs and timelines and materials, and Fiona found herself relaxing in a way she usually didn't with clients. He was easy to talk to, quick to laugh, obviously intelligent but not condescending about it. When he offered her tea, she accepted gratefully, following him to a sitting room where a fire was already burning. "You live here alone?" she asked, settling into a velvet armchair that was probably worth more than her van. "Mostly, I have staff who come during the day, but they live in the village." He poured tea from a silver service, his movements precise and graceful. "I prefer the quiet. 300 years of social obligations teaches you to value solitude." Fiona laughed. 300 years, right. You wear it well." "Thank you." He handed her a cup, his expression perfectly pleasant, giving nothing away. She sipped the tea, trying to figure out if he was joking. He had to be joking. Except his house looked like a museum, and he'd just admitted to going to her show 3 times, which suggested either genuine interest or serial killer tendencies. And she was choosing to believe the former. "So what do you actually do? Besides commission beautiful lighting and live in mansions?" "I invest," Balthazar said. "Venture capital mostly." Technology companies. It's fascinating watching how quickly the world changes now compared to, well, it used to change much more slowly. The good old days when a letter took 3 months to arrive and medical care meant leeches. Exactly. People romanticize the past, but they forget how much of it was just waiting. Waiting for news, waiting for travel, waiting for infections to either kill you or not. He settled into the chair across from her, perfectly at ease. Now you can speak to someone across the world instantly, and it's boring. We're spoiled by miracles. Says the man who lives in a castle. A restored manor house, he corrected, but he was grinning. The castle is in Romania, and it's actually quite drafty. I sold it in 1923. Fiona found herself grinning back, charmed despite herself. You're committing to this bit very thoroughly. It's not a bit, but I understand the skepticism. He sipped his own tea, watching her over the rim of the cup. You'll figure it out eventually. Most people do if they spend enough time here. Before she could ask what that meant, wind rattled the windows hard enough to make her jump. Balthazar stood smoothly, crossing to look out at the darkening afternoon. The storms arrived early. You should stay the night. The road down the mountain will be impassable within the hour. I have a hotel booked in the village, which you won't reach. He turned back to her, his expression serious. I'm not trying to be dramatic, Miss Marlowe. This area gets storms that strand people for days. You're welcome to try if you insist, but I'd rather not spend tomorrow organizing a rescue operation because your van went off a cliff. She joined him at the window. The snow was already falling thick and fast, visibility dropping by the second. He was right. She could admit that. Driving in this would be suicidal. I don't want to impose. You're not. I have 12 bedrooms, 11 of which are empty and made up for guests who never visit. He said it lightly, but she caught something underneath, a loneliness he was trying to hide. Please, stay. Work if you like, or just enjoy the fire. I promise I'm an excellent host and only moderately a vampire. The way he said it so casually made her laugh. Well, if you're only moderately undead, I suppose I can risk it. Wonderful. I'll have your things brought in. She followed him back into the hall, watching as he moved with that uncanny grace, and thought about the lack of breath fog, the impossible pallor, the offhand comments about centuries. Artists were supposed to be observant, and she was better than most at actually seeing what was in front of her. But this was insane. Vampires weren't real. Vampires were metaphors and movie monsters and Anne Rice novels, not polite venture capitalists who commissioned art glass. Except his hands had been so cold. Balthazar showed her to a bedroom on the second floor, all dark wood and cream linens, and another enormous fireplace already lit. Her cases were already waiting by the door, which should have been impossible since she'd seen no staff and he'd been with her the entire time. How did you? I move quickly when I need to, he said, and left before she could ask anything else. Fiona sat on the edge of the massive bed and tried to think rationally. She was snowed in with a strange man in a remote mansion. This was the setup for either a murder or a really good story, possibly both, but Balthazar didn't feel dangerous. Odd, yes, potentially inhuman maybe, but not threatening. He'd been nothing but courteous and kind, and there was something about the way he'd talked about loneliness that made her want to stay, even if the road had been clear. She changed for dinner because the house seemed to demand it, pulling on the one nice dress she'd packed, a deep green velvet that her friends insisted made her look like a pre-Raphaelite painting. When she made her way back downstairs, following the sound of music, she found Balthazar in yet another sitting room, this one lined with books. He'd changed, too, into a white shirt and black trousers that looked casually elegant in a way she'd never managed. You look lovely, he said, standing when she entered. I hope you don't mind. I had dinner prepared. Nothing fancy, just soup and bread. Comfort food for a storm. The table was set by the fire, intimate and warm, and Fiona felt something in her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite name. When was the last time someone had gone to this much trouble for her? When had she last felt this noticed? They talked through dinner, the conversation ranging from art to history to technology to philosophy. Balthazar was well-read and well-traveled, with stories that spanned centuries if you believed his casual timeline, and Fiona found herself leaning forward, drawn in by the cadence of his voice and the intelligence in his eyes. He asked about her work, her inspiration, her process, and actually listened to the answers like they mattered. I started with glass because it's honest, she said, working her way through a second bowl of soup that was genuinely excellent. You can't hide mistakes in glass. Every flaw shows, every air bubble, every stress fracture. It's terrifying and perfect at the same time. That's why it suits you, Balthazar said. You're honest, too. You say what you think. My mother calls it a lack of filter. I call it refreshing. Most people spend so much energy hiding what they mean that conversations become meaningless. You're direct. I appreciate that. Fiona studied him across the table, trying to reconcile the warmth in his voice with the impossible cold of his skin, the animation in his face with the stillness of his chest that she'd just noticed, the lack of breathing. Can I ask you something potentially rude? Please. Are you actually a vampire? He went very still, and for the first time since she'd arrived, his expression closed off, becoming unreadable. Then, slowly, carefully, he smiled. Yes? Oh, she wasn't sure what she'd expected. Maybe a laugh and a denial, maybe an explanation about a medical condition. Not calm confirmation. Okay? Just okay? I mean, it explains some things. The whole aesthetic, the skin, the not breathing thing, which I just noticed and which is deeply weird, by the way, the casual references to the 19th century. She was babbling. She knew she was babbling, but her brain was trying to reorganize reality, and it was taking some effort. Are you going to bite me? No. He said it firmly, meeting her eyes. I don't feed from unwilling donors, and I would never use a guest that way. You're safe here, Fiona. I promise you that. The use of her first name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. How does it work? The feeding thing? I have arrangements. People who provide blood voluntarily, safely. It's not romantic, it's just necessary. He leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. You're taking this remarkably well. I'm an artist. We're supposed to be open to new experiences. The joke came out shaky but genuine. Also, I think I'm in shock. Ask me again in an hour when it sets in and I might be less calm. Fair enough. Some of the tension left his shoulders. You can leave when the storm clears or stay and complete the commission, whichever you prefer. I won't hold you to a contract if this changes things. Does it change things? Fiona asked, more to herself than to him. She thought about the evening, the easy conversation, the way he made her laugh, the attention he paid to her words. The fact that he was a vampire was bizarre, but it didn't erase the connection she felt. If anything, it explained why he seemed to understand loneliness so well. 300 years of watching people age and die while you stayed frozen, that would isolate anyone. I don't know. I don't think so. Balthazar's smile returned, warm and genuine. Then stay, please. I'd like you to. She stayed. The storm raged for 3 days, and Fiona worked in the ballroom, setting up her equipment and beginning the first chandelier. Balthazar was an ideal host, appearing at regular intervals with food and conversation, but never hovering. He seemed to know when she needed company and when she needed to focus, a sensitivity that felt almost supernatural until she remembered it probably was. On the second evening, she found him in the library, reading by lamplight, even though the sun had set hours ago. Do you sleep? She asked from the doorway. Not much anymore. A few hours every few days. He marked his page and set the book aside. Done for the night? My eyes are crossing. I've been staring at glass rods for 6 hours. She crossed to the chair beside his, curling up in it. Tell me a story. What kind of story? A vampire story. A real one, not the movie version. Balthazar considered this, his expression thoughtful. Most of the true stories are sadder than you'd expect. We're not the charismatic monsters popular culture suggests. Mostly we're just old and trying to find reasons to keep going. That's depressing. It's honest. He shifted in his seat and she noticed the way the firelight didn't quite seem to touch him, like the warmth stopped just before it reached his skin. I was turned in 1724. I was 32, a minor noble with more ambition than sense. I thought immortality would give me time to accomplish everything I'd dreamed of. Instead, it taught me that time without connection is just emptiness wearing a different mask. You don't have other vampires? Friends? Family? Some. We're scattered, territorial in ways humans aren't, and we tend to lose each other. Arguments that last decades, grudges that become wars, simple drifting apart when you have eternity to procrastinate a visit. He met her eyes. I haven't had someone in this house who knew what I was and chose to stay in perhaps 80 years. Fiona felt her heart crack a little. That's why you've been so nice. I'm probably the closest thing you've had to a friend in decades. You're not here because I'm desperate for company, Balthazar said gently. You're here because you're talented and interesting and you laugh at my jokes even when they're terrible. The fact that you're willing to have dinner with a vampire is just a bonus. Your jokes aren't terrible. Last night I made a pun about glass half full. It was objectively terrible. She grinned despite herself. Okay, that one was bad. But your story about the Venetian glassmakers trying to patent immortality was funny. That one was true, which helps. They fell into comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Fiona found herself studying him, the sharp lines of his face, the way his hair caught the light like spun silver, the profound stillness of him when he wasn't deliberately animating himself for her benefit. He was beautiful in an otherworldly way, but it was his kindness that drew her. The gentleness in how he spoke, the genuine interest he showed in her work, the vulnerability he'd just displayed. "Can I try something?" she asked. "That's a dangerously open-ended question." "Give me your hand." He extended it without hesitation, and she took it in both of hers, pressing her palms against his. His skin was ice cold, so cold it almost burned, and she could feel no pulse in his wrist. But he didn't pull away, just watched her with those storm-gray eyes. "Does it hurt?" she asked, "being this cold?" "I don't feel temperature the way you do. It's just what I am now." His fingers curled slightly against hers. "Does it bother you?" "No, it's just strange. You seem so alive when we talk, but then there's this, the physical reminder that you're not." She pressed harder, trying to will some of her warmth into him. "I wish you could feel warm, just for a moment." Something flickered across his face, too fast for her to read. "That's kind of you." She released his hand reluctantly, already missing the contact despite the cold. "Tell me more stories. I want to know everything." So he talked, and she listened, and the night stretched on in a bubble of warmth and words while the storm howled outside. By the fourth day, the snow had stopped, but the roads remained impassable, and Fiona found she wasn't in any hurry for them to clear. She'd completed the first chandelier, a cascade of hand-blown crystals that caught the light like frozen water, and Balthazar had stood beneath it for 20 minutes, just watching the way the prism scattered rainbow shadows across the floor. "It's perfect," he'd said quietly. "Better than I imagined. Wait until all 6 are done. This room is going to look like the inside of a kaleidoscope." She started the second piece that afternoon, but found her concentration drifting. Balthazar was in the room, reading in a chair he'd brought in specifically to keep her company, and she kept glancing at him instead of her work. The way he turned pages, the slight smile when he reached an amusing passage, the absolute absorption he showed. She'd never met anyone who was so completely present when you spoke to them, who made you feel like you were the only person in the world worth attending to. "You're staring," he said, without looking up from his book. "Sorry, occupational hazard. I'm trained to see things." "And what do you see?" "Someone who's lonely but trying very hard to pretend he isn't." Now he did look up, his expression startled. "That's uncomfortably perceptive. You keep everyone at arm's length, polite, charming, generous, but distant, like you're afraid to let anyone too close." She set down her glass cutter, turning to face him fully. "Why did you really ask me here, Balthazar?" He closed the book slowly, his movements careful. "Because your work moved me. Because I wanted something beautiful in this house. Because I'm tired of living surrounded by antiques and memories." "And?" A long pause. "And because I'm running out of time and I wanted to do something good with what's left." The words landed like stones. "What does that mean?" "Come here, I want to show you something." He led her through the house to his private chambers, rooms she hadn't seen yet. They were simpler than the rest of the estate, less ornate, almost austere. He stopped in front of a full-length mirror and gestured for her to stand beside him. "Look," he said quietly. Fiona looked. She saw herself, messy bun and paint-stained clothes, cheeks flushed from the warmth of the house, and she saw Balthazar, pale and perfect and utterly still. But there was something else, something she hadn't noticed before because she'd been focused on his face. His fingertips were faintly blue, a delicate frost seeming to creep beneath the skin. And now that he'd pointed it out, she could see it elsewhere too, the faintest trace of ice at his wrists, along his collarbone where his shirt opened. "What is that?" she whispered. "A curse. An old one, laid on me about a century ago by someone I wronged rather badly." His voice was matter of fact, but she heard the fear underneath. "It's turning me to ice, slowly over the course of decades. Eventually it will reach my heart, and I'll freeze completely. A living statue, conscious but trapped. Horror washed through her. That's monstrous. Can't you break it?" "I've tried. Every magical contact I have, every witch and warlock and practitioner I could find. Nothing's worked. The curse is tied to what I am, the cold that already exists in vampires. It's just taking what's already there and making it permanent." He turned away from the mirror. "I have perhaps a year left. Maybe 2. That's why I commissioned the chandeliers. I wanted the house to be beautiful one last time before I have to close it forever." "There has to be something." Fiona's mind was racing. "You said it feeds on what you are." "The cold. What if you could change that? Generate warmth somehow?" "Vampires don't generate warmth. We're dead things animated by magic. Heat is beyond us. But you laugh. You feel emotion. You think. You read and appreciate art. That's not dead, Balthazar. That's alive in every way that matters." He smiled at her, sad and fond. "You're kind to say so, but physically, biologically, I'm a corpse that moves. There's no warmth to kindle." "I don't believe that." The conviction in her voice surprised her. "I've spent 4 days with you, and you're the most vital person I've ever met. You're not dead. You're just cold, and cold can be warmed." "How?" She didn't have an answer, and her silence said it for her. Balthazar reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers ice against her skin. "It's all right. I've had 300 years, which is more than most people get. I'm not afraid of the end. I just wanted something beautiful to look at while I wait for it." But Fiona was afraid, she realized. Afraid of this brilliant, kind, lonely man being trapped forever in his own body. Afraid of never seeing him smile again, never hearing his laugh. Afraid of how much she'd come to care about him in such a short time. "The roads should be clear tomorrow," Balthazar said, withdrawing his hand. "You can head back to the city. I'll pay you for the full commission regardless. You don't need to finish the work." "No." "Fiona." "No," she repeated firmly. "I'm staying and I'm finishing the chandeliers and we're going to figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out." "Then I'm staying anyway. You said you haven't had a friend in 80 years. Well, you have one now, and friends don't leave when things get hard." The expression on his face was so full of hope and gratitude that it hurt to look at. "You don't have to do this." "I know. I want to." She spent the evening researching, using Balthazar's extensive library and his Wi-Fi, which felt anachronistic in the Gothic mansion, but was apparently quite good. Vampire curses, magical ice, breaking enchantments, anything she could find. Most of it was folklore and nonsense, but there were threads of truth woven through, mentions of warmth and life and connection being antithetical to vampire nature. Balthazar brought her tea at midnight and found her surrounded by books. "Any luck?" "Define luck." "I've learned a lot about Renaissance superstitions and nothing about actual curse breaking." She scrubbed her hands over her face. "Everything keeps coming back to warmth and life, which you say you can't access." "Because I can't." "What if you could borrow it?" The idea was forming as she spoke. Heat transfer is basic physics. If you were in contact with something warm, something alive, would it affect you? "Temporarily. I'd register the touch, but it wouldn't change my base temperature." He settled into the chair across from her. "Where are you going with this?" "I don't know yet. Let me think." She stared at her notes, trying to make the pieces fit. "The curse feeds on your cold. But you're not always equally cold, are you? You said you can feel touch, which means there's some level of sensation happening." "Yes, but so there's interaction between you and the world. Exchange of information, if not heat." She was getting excited now, the pieces clicking together. "What if the curse isn't just about temperature? What if it's about isolation? You said it was laid by someone you wronged. What if the point was to ensure you could never be close to anyone again? Balthazar went very still. That would be appropriately cruel. And if isolation is the curse, connection might be the cure. Not magic, just genuine human, or well, vampire connection, letting someone in. She met his eyes. When's the last time you let anyone really know you? Not just visit, but know. I don't, he stopped thinking. Before the curse. When I still thought relationships were worth the inevitable loss. So for a century you've been alone, and the curse has been getting worse. Correlation isn't causation, but it might be. Balthazar, what do you have to lose by trying? He looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable and desperate in his expression. And what does trying look like? Letting me in. Actually in, not just polite dinner conversation, trusting me with the parts of yourself you keep hidden. She stood, crossing to kneel in front of his chair. Let me be your friend, your real friend. Let me know you. You already do, more than most. Then let me know you more. His hand came up to cup her face, ice-cold fingers against her warm skin. Why are you doing this? Because you matter, Fiona said simply. Because you're brilliant and kind and you've been alone for too long. Because the thought of you trapped and frozen makes me want to break the entire world until I find a way to fix it. That's, his voice cracked. No one said anything like that to me in longer than I can remember. Then people are idiots. She covered his hand with hers, pressing it closer. I'm staying. We're going to finish the chandeliers and fill this house with light and figure out how to beat this thing. Together. The smile he gave her was radiant. Together. They fell into a new rhythm after that. Fiona worked on the chandeliers during the day, and Balthazar stopped pretending he had business elsewhere. He stayed with her, talking about everything and nothing, telling her stories from his long life, asking about hers. She learned about his turning, the vampire who'd made him and then abandoned him, the decades of loneliness that followed. She told him about her family, her struggles as an artist, her fear that she'd never create anything that mattered. Everything you create matters, he said one afternoon, watching her shape molten glass. You put pieces of yourself into it. How could that not matter? Pretty words, but most of my pieces end up in storage. Because you haven't found the right audience yet. When you do, when people see what you're capable of, you're going to be extraordinary. You already are. You just need the world to catch up. She set down her tools, turning to face him. How are you so sure? Because I've lived long enough to recognize talent when I see it. And passion. And vision. You have all three. He stood, crossing to examine the chandelier taking shape on her work table. This is going to outlive both of us. People will look at it in 100 years and feel what you felt when you made it. That's immortality, Fiona. The real kind. You could have that too. You have time to create whatever you want. I have a year, maybe. You have more than that. We're going to fix this. Your optimism is touching but misplaced. My optimism is based on research and spite. I've read 17 books on curse breaking this week, and I'm getting a degree in vampire metaphysics through sheer stubbornness. She wiped her hands on her apron. The ice is slower now, isn't it? Since we started really talking. He glanced down at his hands, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. Maybe. It's hard to tell day to day. I can tell. Your fingertips were solid blue a week ago. Now it's just the nails. She reached for his hand, examining it. It's working, Balthazar. Connection is helping. Or it's coincidence. You don't believe that? No, he admitted. I don't. She held his hand between both of hers, trying to will warmth into him through sheer determination. Then let me keep helping. Let me all the way in. You are all the way in. I've told you things I've never told anyone. But you're still holding back. I can feel it. There's a wall you won't let me past. He pulled his hand free gently. Because past that wall is everything that makes me monstrous. The hunger, the violence, the things I've done to survive 3 centuries. You see the civilized version, Fiona, the man I want to be. The rest is part of you, she interrupted. And I want to know all of it. The good, the bad, the monstrous, all of it. Why? Because that's what connection is. Not just the pretty parts, but everything. She stepped closer. Show me. Trust me with it. If I do, you'll leave. Try me. So he told her. About the early years when he'd killed to feed, before he understood control, about the wars he'd participated in, the deaths he'd caused, about the darkness that lived in all vampires, the constant whisper that humans were prey. Nothing more. He told her about watching everyone he'd ever cared about age and die, about the loneliness that had calcified into numbness, about the relief he'd felt when the curse first appeared, because at least it was an ending. Fiona listened to all of it, and when he finished, she was still standing there. "That's it?" she asked. "That's it? 300 years of mistakes and monstrosity, and 300 years of learning and growing and choosing to be better than your nature. Balthazar, you think those things make you monstrous, but they make you human. Real humans, living ones. We all have darkness. We all make choices we regret. The difference is, you've had centuries to accumulate yours and you're still trying to be kind." She reached for him again. "You're not a monster. You're just someone who's been hurt and lonely for too long. You should be afraid of me." "I'm terrified," she said honestly, "but not of you, of losing you, of not fixing this in time." "Fiona, I care about you." The words came out in a rush. "More than I should after 2 weeks, more than is probably smart, but I do. You're brilliant and funny, and you make me feel seen in a way no one else ever has. And I know this is probably just proximity and timing and some kind of gothic romance nonsense, but I don't care. I care about you and I'm not leaving." He stared at her like she'd performed a miracle. "I care about you too. So much that it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with me. Let's be scared together and figure it out as we go." "That's a terrible plan. You have a better one?" "No." "Then it's settled." She grinned at him, giddy with relief and fear and something that felt dangerously like joy. "We're doing this." "Doing what exactly?" "I have no idea, but we're doing it together." He laughed, genuine and bright, and pulled her into a hug. His body was ice cold against hers, but she didn't care, wrapping her arms around him and holding on tight. His heart didn't beat, but she could feel the tension leaving him, the wall he'd built finally crumbling. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For what?" "Staying." They stood like that for a long time, warmth and cold pressed together, and Fiona felt something shift in the air between them, something important, though she couldn't name it yet. The chandeliers progressed. 3 finished, then 4, then 5. The ballroom was transforming into something ethereal, light cascading from the ceiling in frozen waterfalls of crystal. Balthazar spent hours in there, watching the play of rainbows across the floor, and Fiona watched him watching it, memorizing the wonder in his face. "I've never made anything this beautiful," she said one evening, standing beside him. "You've made exactly this beautiful. I've seen your portfolio, remember? This is different. I'm making it for someone who understands it, who sees what I'm trying to do." She leaned against his shoulder, ignoring the cold. "You bring out the best in me. The best was always there. I'm just paying attention. Still, this room, these lights, I wouldn't have made them like this for anyone else." She turned to look up at him. "They're for you. A gift." His expression softened. "The greatest gift anyone's given me in a century. I haven't given you the last one yet. Wait until you see what I'm planning for the centerpiece. Now I'm intrigued." "Good. Mystery builds anticipation." They were standing very close, she realized, close enough that she could see the faint pattern of frost beneath his skin, delicate as lace, close enough to kiss if she wanted to. If he wanted to. Did she want to? Yes, her heart answered immediately. Yes, she wanted to kiss him, wanted to feel his cold lips against hers, wanted to know if he'd kiss her back or pull away, wanted to close the last distance between them and see what happened. But this wasn't the moment, not yet. They had time, and she wanted to do it right. Balthazar seemed to sense the direction of her thoughts, because his eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to her mouth before he caught himself and stepped back. "I should let you work. The light's good for another hour. Stay. Please. I work better when you're here. Then I'll stay." He settled into his usual chair, picking up a book, and Fiona turned back to her glass. But the air felt different now, charged with possibility. She caught him watching her instead of reading, caught herself glancing at him every few minutes. The awareness between them was building, inevitable as the spring that would eventually come. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her comfortable bed in her beautiful borrowed room and thought about Balthazar alone in his chambers, reading through another sleepless night. Thought about the ice creeping through his body, the time they might not have. Thought about the way he smiled at her, the gentleness in his terrible cold hands. She was falling in love with him. Had probably already fallen, if she was honest. It was absurd and impossible and absolutely true. The question was what to do about it. She found him in the library, exactly where she had expected. He looked up when she entered, surprised and pleased. "Can't sleep?" "Too much thinking." She settled onto the couch beside him. "Tell me honestly, is the ice still slowing?" He set his book aside, considering. "Yes, significantly. I'd expected it to reach my elbows by now, but it's barely past my wrists, and it's receded slightly in some places, which shouldn't be possible. So connection is working." "It appears so. Then we need more of it. Deeper connection." She took a breath, gathering courage. "I have an idea, but you're going to think I'm insane. I already think you're gloriously insane. That's part of your charm. The curse responds to isolation, right? To emotional cold. What if we combat it with the opposite? Not just friendship, but actual intimacy, real closeness." "Fiona, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that every piece of research I've done mentions warmth and life and love as antithetical to vampire curses, and you haven't let yourself feel those things in decades." She met his eyes. "Let yourself feel them now. With me." I'm talking about being honest, about admitting that this thing between us is more than just friendship, about seeing where it goes if we stop pretending we don't feel it." Her heart was hammering. "I'm falling in love with you, Balthazar. I know it's fast and probably insane, but it's true. And I think you feel it too." He was very still, his expression unreadable. "You can't love me. I'm a vampire. I'm cursed. I have a year at most." "Then we have a year. I'd rather have a year with you than a lifetime of safe, boring relationships with people who don't see me the way you do. If the curse can't be broken, then we'll deal with it, together. But I think it can be broken, Balthazar. I think you can be saved, and I think the way to do it is to let yourself feel again, really feel." She reached for his hand. "Love me back, please. Let me in all the way." "I already do." His voice was raw. "I've been in love with you since you laughed at my terrible pun about glass. Maybe before." It's terrifying. Relief flooded through her. Good terrifying or bad terrifying? Good. So good I don't trust it. "Trust it anyway. Trust me." She leaned closer. "We can do this. We can beat the curse and figure out the future and make something beautiful together. But only if you let yourself try." "And if I fail? If the curse wins and you have to watch me freeze? Then I'll be there. You won't be alone. That's the whole point." She was close enough now to feel the cold radiating off him. "You don't have to be alone anymore." He raised one ice-cold hand to her face, cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." "I'm really not. I'm terrified right now. That's what makes it brave." Then he was kissing her, and the world condensed to the point where their lips met. He was cold, so cold it almost hurt, but underneath the chill she could feel him, feel the desperate way he pulled her closer, the 300 years of loneliness pouring into the kiss. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with everything she had, trying to pour warmth into him through sheer force of will. When they broke apart, they were both shaking. "Fiona," he breathed, and his voice was full of wonder. She touched his face, his cheek, and froze. "Balthazar, your skin. What about it?" "It's warm. Just a little, just here, but it's warm." He raised his own hand to his face, pressing where hers had been, and his eyes went wide. "That's impossible." "Apparently not." She was grinning now, giddy with hope. "It's working. Love is working. The curse is breaking. One kiss can't break a century-old curse. Then we'll need more kisses, for research purposes." He laughed, bright and disbelieving, and kissed her again, and again. And by the time they finally pulled apart, his cheeks were noticeably warmer, a faint flush of color showing through the white. "This is real," he whispered. "It's actually real." Told you. Love beats darkness. It's basic fairy tale logic. You're using fairy tales as scientific method. And it's working, so clearly I'm brilliant. She rested her forehead against his. We're going to fix this. You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay, he corrected. Both of us. They stayed up until dawn, talking and kissing and marveling at the warmth spreading through his face, down his neck. By the time the sun rose, his hands were merely cool instead of ice cold, and the blue had faded from his fingertips entirely. I'd forgotten what warmth felt like, Balthazar said, staring at his hands in wonder. I'd forgotten this was possible. Get used to it. I plan to keep you very warm. He pulled her close again, and she felt him breathe, actually breathe for the first time since she'd met him. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never. You're stuck with me now. Promise? Promise. The final chandelier took another week to complete. Fiona worked on it with newfound purpose, pouring every ounce of skill she had into making it perfect. It was larger than the others, more complex, with layers of crystal that created depth and movement. When light hit it from the right angle, it would look like a frozen explosion, suspended in time. Balthazar healed while she worked. The warmth spread through his body gradually, the ice receding inch by inch. His skin took on a less deathly pallor, almost human. His chest rose and fell with unnecessary but possible breaths. He started eating food again, small amounts, rediscovering tastes he'd lost centuries ago. I can feel the sun, he said one morning, standing by a window with his hand in a shaft of light. Not enough to burn, not yet, but I can feel it. The warmth. Fiona wrapped her arms around him from behind. Spring's coming. You'll be able to go outside soon. We'll go outside, together. I want to show you the gardens when they bloom. I'd like that. The chandeliers were installed by the end of March. All 6 of them hung in the ballroom, transforming it into a cathedral of light. Balthazar stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, taking it all in, and Fiona watched him with her heart in her throat. It's perfect, he said finally. More than perfect. It's alive. Just like you. He turned to her and she saw that the last of the ice was gone. His eyes were still gray, but they were warm now, warm and full of life and love. Thanks to you. Thanks to us. We did this together. Dance with me. He held out his hand. There's no music. We'll make our own. She took his hand, letting him pull her into a waltz. They moved through the rainbow shadows, turning beneath the chandeliers, and Fiona felt like she was living in a dream. A beautiful, impossible, perfect dream. I love you, Balthazar said as they spun. I should have said it before, but I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. I love you too, so much. He kissed her there, in the middle of the ballroom, under the lights she'd made for him. And when they pulled apart, they were both flushed and breathless and completely, impossibly alive. Spring arrived properly in April, bringing warmth and green things and flowers. The gardens around the estate exploded into bloom, revealing the careful landscaping that had been hidden under snow. Balthazar walked through them with Fiona, marveling at how the sun felt on his skin, warm but no longer burning. The curse changed something fundamental, he explained, examining a rosebush. Weakened my vampire nature enough that daylight doesn't hurt anymore. I'm not human, but I'm not quite vampire either. Something in between. Does that bother you? No, it feels right, actually. Like I finally found a balance. He plucked a rose and handed it to her. I can live on blood or food, sleep or not, walk in sun or shadow. I'm free in a way I haven't been since I was turned. And the immortality? Still there, as far as I can tell. I'm not aging. He took her hand. Which brings me to something I need to ask you. Her heart started beating faster. Yes? I want you to stay. Not just for the commission, not just for the season. Stay with me, live here, work here. Let me support your art so you never have to worry about rent or landlords or selling your soul for gallery space. He pulled her closer. I know it's fast, I know it's insane, but I've wasted enough of my immortality on loneliness. I don't want to waste another day without you. Yes, Fiona said immediately. Yes, obviously yes, I'll stay. His smile could have lit the world. Thank God. I was prepared to beg. No begging necessary. I love you and I want to build a life with you. Whatever that looks like. It looks like this. He gestured at the gardens, the mansion, the spring sunlight. It looks like filling this house with people again, with warmth and light and life. It looks like you making art while I watch and marvel. It looks like forever, if you'll have me. Forever sounds perfect. They spent the spring opening the house properly. Balthazar contacted old friends, vampires, and humans alike, inviting them to visit. The mansion filled with voices and laughter for the first time in decades. Fiona set up a proper studio in one of the empty wings and started working on her next project, a series of glass sculptures inspired by the gardens. In May, Balthazar threw a party to celebrate the chandeliers. Artists and collectors and society people filled the ballroom, drinking champagne and staring up at the lights in wonder. Fiona wore a dress the color of sapphires and stayed close to Balthazar's side, watching him come alive in a way she hadn't seen before. This was who he was meant to be, she realized, not isolated and frozen, but connected and warm and part of the world. "You did this," he whispered to her during a quiet moment. "You brought me back to life. We did it together. That's how this works." Still, I was resigned to ending alone and frozen. Now I'm here, warm and surrounded by people I care about, with a woman I love beside me. It's more than I dreamed possible. Get used to it. This is your life now. Our life. He kissed her there, in front of everyone, and she heard someone start applauding. Then everyone was applauding, cheering for them, and Fiona felt her cheeks burn with a blush that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with joy. Summer arrived, and with it came the full flowering of their relationship. They learned each other's rhythms, the quiet, comfortable intimacy of shared space and shared dreams. Fiona created, and Balthazar invested, using his centuries of knowledge to support artists and innovators who needed backing. They traveled sometimes, short trips to cities and galleries, but they always came back to the mansion that had become home. "I never thought I could have this," Balthazar admitted one night as they lay in the grass watching stars. "Happiness, peace, someone to share it with. You deserve it. You always deserved it. You just needed to believe it. I believe it now. You make me believe it. Good, because I plan to spend a very long time proving it to you." "How long?" "Forever, ideally. Think you can handle me for eternity?" He rolled to face her, his expression serious and tender. "I can't offer you immortality. I'm not strong enough as a vampire anymore to turn someone, and I wouldn't ask you to give up your humanity anyway. We'll have your lifetime, however long that is. Then I'll have to go on without you." Fiona had thought about this, late at night when she couldn't sleep, the eventual ending that was inevitable. "I know, and it's not fair to you to lose me, but I'd rather have 50 or 60 years with you than infinity without you. Wouldn't you?" "Yes, God, yes. Every moment with you is worth the eventual grief." "Then we have a deal. We love each other fiercely for as long as we have. We make it count. We don't waste a single day. That's all I want. All I've ever wanted, really. To make the time matter. Then let's make it matter." They married in the autumn, a small ceremony in the gardens with the chandeliers glowing through the ballroom windows behind them. Fiona wore white and carried roses from the garden. Balthazar wore gray and couldn't stop smiling. Their friends, human and vampire both, celebrated with them late into the night. "I never thought I'd marry a vampire king," Fiona said as they danced. "Technically, I'm not a king. That was mostly hyperbole and a very old title that doesn't really apply anymore. You're my king. That's all that matters. And you're my queen. My heart. My life." He spun her out and back in. "My salvation. Stop, you'll make me cry, and I spent too long on this makeup. Then I'll just have to kiss it off you later. Promise?" "Promise." Winter came again, but this time the house was warm, filled with love and light and purpose. Fiona worked on her glass, creating pieces that galleries fought over. Balthazar supported other artists, building a reputation as someone who understood and valued creative vision. They hosted parties and quiet dinners, filled the house with guests and sent them away happy. On the anniversary of the day they met, Balthazar took Fiona back to the ballroom. The chandeliers glowed above them, casting rainbow shadows across the floor. "A year ago I was dying," he said quietly, "slowly freezing to death, alone and resigned to it. Then you arrived and everything changed. A year ago, I was broke and desperate for a commission. I had no idea I'd find love in a mansion on a mountain. I kissed you that first time and my cheeks warmed. Do you remember? Of course. That's when we knew it would work. That's when everything changed. It changed before that. It changed the moment you decided to stay, to fight for me when I'd given up on myself. He took her hands. You saved me, Fiona. In every way a person can be saved. You saved me too. Gave me purpose, support, love. Gave me a home and a future. And yourself. She smiled up at him. We saved each other. Then let's keep saving each other, every day, for as long as we have. Deal. They danced beneath the lights, warmth and life and love wrapped around them like a blessing. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle. But inside the house was warm, the fire was burning, and two people who had found each other against all odds held tight and refused to let go. 300 winters of cold, ended by a kiss and a choice, and the fierce determination of a glassblower who refused to accept that frozen meant finished. This was not an ending, Fiona thought, as Balthazar spun her through the rainbow shadows. This was a beginning. Their beginning. And it was more beautiful than anything she could have dreamed. The house that had been a tomb became a home. The vampire who had been freezing came back to life, and the artist who had been drifting found her anchor. Together, they built something that would last. Not forever, perhaps, but long enough to matter, long enough to be real. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. To be seen, to be known, to be loved, to find someone worth thawing for, worth living for, worth choosing every day. Balthazar had found that in Fiona. Fiona had found that in Balthazar. And on a winter night beneath lights made of glass and magic and love, they held each other close and knew, bone deep, that they had won. The curse was broken. The ice was gone. What remained was warmth and hope, and a future they would build together, one beautiful day at a time. The chandeliers glowed above them, eternal and perfect, reflecting light into every corner of the ballroom, a monument to love and second chances and the impossible made real. Fiona rested her head against Balthazar's shoulder and smiled. This was home. He was home, and she was never letting go. Years passed in the mansion on the mountain. Seasons turned, winter into spring, into summer, into autumn, into winter again. An endless cycle of change and growth. Fiona's art career flourished, her installations appearing in museums and galleries around the world. But she always came back to the mansion, to her studio, and her gardens, and her husband. Balthazar had been right about the time they'd have, bittersweet and precious. Fiona didn't become immortal, didn't stop aging. She grew older gracefully, silver threading through her dark hair, laugh lines appearing around her eyes. Balthazar remained exactly as he was, frozen at the age he'd been when the curse broke, and they both knew what that meant. But they didn't waste time mourning what they couldn't change. Instead, they filled their days with purpose and joy. They traveled, visited friends, supported causes they believed in. They argued and laughed and made love and made up. They lived, fully and completely, squeezing every drop of meaning from the time they had. On Fiona's 60th birthday, they stood in the gardens watching the sunset. "Any regrets?" Balthazar asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that we don't have longer. We have now. That's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything." She leaned into him, comfortable and warm and content. "When I'm gone, don't. When I'm gone," she continued firmly. "Don't freeze again. Don't close the house and hide. Promise me you'll stay warm, stay connected, keep living." "Fiona, promise me. I need to know you'll be okay." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I promise I'll live. I'll stay warm. I'll remember what you taught me about being alive." "Good. That's all I need." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Beautiful and temporary and absolutely perfect. Fiona lived another 20 years after that conversation, active and creative until nearly the end. She died peacefully in her sleep at 81, with Balthazar holding her hand, and her last words were, Thank you for the light." Balthazar grieved, deep and terrible, but he kept his promise. He stayed warm, he kept the house open, he continued supporting artists, mentoring young creators, living in a way that honored Fiona's memory. And on winter nights, when the snow fell soft outside, he would stand in the ballroom beneath the chandeliers she'd made and remember. Remember her smile, her laugh, her fierce determination. Remember the way she'd refused to let him freeze, the way she'd loved him back to life. The ice never returned. The curse stayed broken. And though he missed her with an ache that would never fully heal, he was grateful. Grateful for the time they'd had, the life they'd built, the love that had saved them both. 70 years after Fiona's death, a young painter arrived at the mansion, stranded by a storm, desperate for shelter. Balthazar welcomed them in, showed them the chandeliers, told them the story of the glassblower who had saved a frozen vampire king with nothing but love and stubbornness. "She sounds amazing," the painter said, staring up at the lights in wonder. "She was, she still is, in everything she left behind. Do you think you'll ever love someone like that again?" Balthazar smiled, sad and fond and full of warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "I don't know, but I'm not closed to it. That's what she taught me. Stay open, stay warm, keep choosing life." The painters stayed for a week while the storm cleared, working on their art in Fiona's old studio. When they left, they carried with them a story about love and magic and second chances, about a house on a mountain where impossible things happened, about a vampire who learned to be warm. And in the ballroom, the chandeliers continued to glow, throwing rainbow shadows across the floor, eternal monuments to a glassblower's love and a vampire's salvation. Some love stories end in tragedy. Some end in triumph. This one ended in light. Not because the ending was happy in every way, not because death was defeated or time was conquered, but because two people who had been frozen in their own ways found each other and chose warmth, chose connection, chose to live and love fiercely for however long they had, and in the end, the warmth remained, the light remained, love remained, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The mansion stood on its mountain, seasons turning around it, hosting artists and dreamers and wanderers who needed shelter. The gardens bloomed and faded and bloomed again. The chandeliers glowed eternal, casting their beautiful light into every corner. And Balthazar lived on, warm and connected and open to joy, carrying Fiona in his heart like a permanent flame. Not frozen, never frozen again, just alive and warm and grateful for every single day. The end of cold, the beginning of light, a love that broke a curse and built a home and proved that even immortal things can change. This was their story. A glassblower and a vampire, winter and spring, ice and warmth, and the kiss that saved them both.